It's either moist and muggy or dark and grungy, cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. But now the spring's coming and the sun is getting sunny, I'll be feeling less bummy and I'm acting like a dummy. Life's so lovely, probably like Chun-Li. I just ain't about to fact check on a blue lit screen that's backlit. When I'd rather stay funky on an A4 page from the notepad of my babe while I pen dope raps and I blaze with my 10 toes tapping away. My dog Humboldt sat in his place, I rock on drum rolls round the way, and in a roundabout way I'm kinda namaste. I just ain't the type of man to say namaste, nah. I'm the type of man that takes naps in a day, at least for a couple hours apiece, cause I don't power through life, so why power through sleep? Nah, I'd rather let life force power through me, and feel at peace in a rhythm and be free, chilling while I sit in a tree or sit by the sea, watch the sunset and rise, thinking symmetry's deep. I mean, there's clearly more to it than meets the eye, it's more fluid than she's a guy. I walk you through it and redefine the why of every piece of the pie so you can finally stop fighting and fly. I want to talk a little bit today about love in the creative process and what it means to love in the act of creating. There's the common way we think about love in our culture is like we meet something and then we fall in love with it. Something, someone, there's that kind of love upon the encounter. Now, creating is a little bit different because the love takes place before it exists. We have an encounter within ourselves and we love it enough to bring it into being, to bring it into the world and make it exist, give it a life of its own. And there's an interesting point, because once you bring life into this world, that life will affect your life and move with your life. And you're now in a dance with that creation. And, sometimes your creations do things in the world. And as the creator of that, you're often interwoven into that story. So there's this bit of love, like we have these things within us that if you want to, you can create them, you can bring them into this world. And one of the most direct routes, the simplest route, is recognizing that you do actually have a love for this thing, for this idea, for this vision that you have. Now, connecting with that love is one of the most simple ways to start creating a structure for you to bring that thing into being. And often we complicate it in all sorts of other things because we don't focus on the love. We focus on the excuses we're making. We focus on all the ways that we're not up to scratch, where we fall short, where we haven't got the habits or consistency. And we're focused on all of these elements that are actually not to do with the principal thing that will help us bring that vision forward and make it exist, because we're not focused on it, we're focused on ourselves. We're focused on all the ways that we're falling short and the way our life and circumstances aren't quite right. So the opportunity with creating is shifting away from that orientation where things just aren't quite right to placing the love for this creation in the center of our, in the center of our world. In that particular channel, it doesn't have to consume your life, but there's a place that exists within you where you are focused on bringing this creation forward and really giving it a life, not just working on it, but knowing that you want to see it exist in the way that you can imagine it. So, and I think it's also important to recognize, like, you have ideas, you have visions, you have notions about the life you want to be living, you have a sense of things that you'd like to do. Now, a lot of the time, the things that you want to do are going to surpass your abilities. And there's going to be certain areas of the things that you want to do that you're actually quite adept at, and that's why you want to do them. In some way you've created skills or imagination or, really thought things through to a certain level. And it's that next step that you're not quite sure how to navigate. I just came back from chatting to a friend here, and it was so cool meeting new people is amazing in the way that you can draw out all of these visions and things that they love that happen within inside of themselves and that they're in various stages of the creative process with. And he was writing a book and he'd had many different stories, and this is the first one that's turned itself into a kind of novel. And he's about 50, 60% of the way through, and he's stuck at this point, you know, and that's really normal. And I just want to say, like, part of what I do as a creative coach, as a coach of the creative process, is help you create structures around bringing your creations to term, as it were. Because there's so much more to it than simply getting to it, right? Like, in the most practical level, it's very helpful to see it as you just got to get to it. You know, when you, on the outside, that's what it will look like. You weren't doing it, and then you were doing it, and doing it made it happen. And I think it's important to recognize that it is both that simple, but also that there are things that you can do to help structure your creative process in a way that makes bringing it to term far more likely, okay? And I think a lot of the time with creativity or with our creative expression, it's so wrapped up in our identity, which is why our minds go to the types of thoughts saying like, I'm not good enough, I'm too lazy, I'm not consistent, I'm not disciplined, all of the excuses. And we're quick to label them as excuses without really understanding the dynamics at play. And so we know we should just get to it, but we're not. And therefore, maybe, and we start to speculate on all of those reasons why that's happening. Now, in big part, I can say as, a professional in this space that the part of the reason why it's happening is because you haven't got the structures set up to make it more favorable, to focus on the creation, to have a nurtured relationship with that love for the creation, and for all, your attention and energy to be directed in that way that's gonna favorably bring that thing into being, that make it far more likely. And that is very different from focusing on yourself and wondering why you're blocked and why this is happening. And that those questions, those whys, will bring a lot of attention to what's wrong, what's the problem, and you start problem solving. And creating isn't problem solving. We're not looking to get rid of anything. We're looking to bring this thing into being. In this case, his book, his novel. So yeah, I'll keep it brief and leave it there. But just know that if you can feel this sense of vision, these ideas that you've got turning around within you, that almost certainly surpass your abilities in one way or another, that actually there's so much of a different way than you can approach this. One of the beautiful things about getting coaching in the way that we'll do it, if you want to work with me, is that it becomes a very light process because the focus isn't on you, it's on the creation. And that love drives everything. That desire to see this thing exist starts to drive everything in your life. And it becomes less about the circumstances not being ideal and certain aspects about yourself not being good enough or proficient enough, to what do I need to do to make this creation exist? And sometimes that includes learning. Often it does, often it includes a level of consistency and discipline, but it's all in service of your desire, which is a very different thing than trying to like problem solve yourself, like get more disciplined because you're lazy. Totally different focus. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Think about what it is you want to bring into being. And if you want to talk about it, hit me up, because part of nurturing that relationship is just realizing it, giving it space in your life. And that can start through talking, and then it starts through all the other exercises that we'll be doing. But really through that, we start to set up that dynamic where your focus is on bringing this thing into being.